because I get the pleasure, the honor, if you would, to work with both Hargeet and Kay Asante every Wednesday. I do want to revisit this Kepler Next Generation Xbox report because he is claiming that this next Xbox is 4 times more powerful than the PlayStation. We've heard conversations about the die size being the biggest in home console history. So, like I said in the opening, I get the privilege of working with 2 men that understand tech better than I ever will. And that is Hargeet Chani and Kay Asante. And I have learned a lot from listening to them on other shows, but being able to work with them on a weekly basis, especially when we get into the tech talk, I get the chance to learn. And what we are learning and what we have heard for quite a while now is that the next Xbox or the next pair of Xboxes are going to be hybrid consoles. Now, one has already been tagged as a $1,200 device. I don't know where that happened. I don't know who said that. I know that Sarah Bond said it's going to be a premium curated device, but she never said $1,200. Someone did actually report that she said that. I don't know where the $1,200 came from. It's just a number that's floating in the air. Now, could it be $1,200? Sure, it absolutely could be. But I don't think it's going to be. I think it's probably going to be $1,000. And the reason why I think it's going to be that expensive is based on the information here from a AMD leaker known as Kepler. He is pretty well known in the games community. He has leaked many things before. And I do want to go over the stats that he had put out there because according to Kepler, the next Xbox, and the chipset is known as Magnus, right? It's codenamed Magnus, is going to launch at 4 times more powerful than the PlayStation 6. Now, there's been some talk on the PlayStation side of things where this next device is going to be $500. Folks, whatever you're sniffing, stop it. Because their next device is not okay. If the PlayStation 5 Pro is over $700, $750 right now, just a pinch under $800 after tax in 2025, what makes you think that the PlayStation 6, which is expected to be significantly more powerful than the Pro, cheaper? Like I mean, like, let's just use common sense here, folks. All right. So ultimately, circling the wagons back to Xbox, we don't know how much this device is going to be. Now, I believe, Hargeet, that there are going to be 2 SKUs. We've heard about this. We've heard that there's going to be the big boy, which is what Sarah Bond was talking about. This high-end, it's going to be high fidelity. It's going to be a very expensive, curated device. Premium is the word that she used. Well, that's going to be for the people like me, you, Kay, and a lot of people in this chat. We're going to spend the big bucks on the big boy. I honestly believe there is going to be an entry-priced console. And I do believe that their next handheld, even though we're getting a preview with the Ally and the Ally X right now, I think it's going to be a dockable Switch-like device. Now, this is a rumor that's been floating around for quite some time. And I think that if you can bring in an S model that is, for anyone that does not want to spend $1,000 on the big boy, you're going to be able to play all your Steam games. You're going to be able to play all of your good old games, as well as, of course, all of your Epic Game Store, as well as all of your Xbox games on this entry price device. Now, how much is that? What does entry price mean? Well, I don't think it's going to be $500. It's probably going to be around $600, and it could be even $700. But if it's a cheaper way into this new hybrid, console/PC device, then it might be something that a lot of people jump on. Because again, ultimately, I think that with this device, not only is it going to play all your Steam games or your Xbox games, it's going to play your PlayStation games as well. And we know that because there's a rumor, and this is where we segued into this, that PlayStation will be having their games in dual entitlement fashion. So if you own it on PlayStation, you're going to be able to play it on PC. And if you buy the games via Steam, you'll be able to play those PlayStation Studio games on these Xbox devices. But before I hand you the microphone, Hargeet, I want to read some of the the bullet points here from Kepler. He goes on to say that the architecture will reportedly use a combination of AMD's next generation Zen 6 CPU cores as well as RDNA 5 with a UDNA graphics architecture. The design. Well, the APU will feature a chiplet design, which is a significant departure from the monolithic design rumored for the PlayStation 6. This modular approach is intended to allow for easier hardware upgrades in future console iterations. And this also, I think, is going to take place for a lot of the OEM devices that are going to come out right after this device. But here's where it gets interesting, Hargeet. The CPU, the processor is rumored to have a hybrid core configuration, potentially with 3 full Zen 6 cores and 8 powerful, efficient Zen 6 C cores. Now, the GPU on this thing is expected, according to Kepler, the graphics portion is expected to be large, with reports suggesting around 68 to 80 RDNA 5 UDNA compute units, or CUs. Kepler L2 has indicated, according to this report, that the UDNA or the RDNA 5 will also feature a significant generational leap in performance, including a 20% gain per CU and a 2-time improvement in ray tracing performance over the current RDNA 4. Now, the memory says here it's going to be anywhere between 36 gigabytes and 48 gigabytes of GDDR7, and that's going to be shipped on a 192-bit bus. Now, this is where it gets interesting, Hargeet. The die size apparently is going to be a really big deal. It says here, Magnus is projected to be the largest consumer console APU ever, around 408 millimeters, and due to its size, the chiplet design, it's expected to be more expensive to produce than its competitors, which would result in a higher console price point, potentially blurring the lines between a console and a high-end gaming PC. Look, this is the future, folks. But the question that a lot of people are going to be asking you, Hargeet, and of course, Asante, when he gets the microphone, is whether or not this is something that can be subsidized. Now, we know we have heard that Microsoft and maybe even Sony are done with this, subsidizing loss on these consoles. And if you don't know what that means, ladies and gentlemen, whenever Xbox sells a console, they were taking upwards of $200 loss per console. And they've been doing this for decades. This is not new. They've always done it this way. And how they've made their money is through software sales. So they took the loss up front, but they got you into the ecosystem, and now you're buying all their games. Well, that's kind of changed a little bit, especially for Sony, because they're not putting out a lot of their own games anymore. Xbox, on the other hand, is putting out a ton of first-party games, but they also have a service that a lot of people are subscribed to, so they're not buying the games, they're paying for the service. Hargeet, let's get your thoughts on what Kepler L2 had to say about the next generation beast of a box.
So all these specs, by the way, is what we've already been hearing as far as the rumors. 4 times more performant is just absolutely ludicrous. That's not going to happen. To put that in perspective, if we take the PS6, my guess now, and it's been somewhat substantiated, 35 to 40-ish T-flops. If you multiply that by 4, 40 times 4, it's 140
T-flops. It's ridiculous.
Yeah, it's 160 if you have 40 T-flops. The 5090 is 103. So there's no world in which this thing comes out at 160 T-flops. That's not happening. That's an insanity. I don't know where this stuff comes from, but it's stupid. It'll be slightly more performant, 20-25% more. Fine. That's realistic. The CU count is supposed to be in the like 40s to 50s range versus 60s to 70s range, right? That's kind of where we are on the two. That is not going to give you 4 times more performance. They're identical beyond that. Same Zen 6, same RDNA 5, same UDNA. UDNA, by the way, just mixes the AI components into the graphics components. So the unified versus a separate RDNA for the graphics engine and a separate chip for the AI part of it. They just combine the two of them, and so your NPU part is just built in. That's what UDNA is, right? So all this stuff is pretty much what we've already known. The chiplet design allows them to say, and this is not a field upgrade thing, right? It allows them to say, hey, we can have an iteration now where we upgrade this component and don't have to upgrade the rest of it, right? So we can just give you an updated with more CUs, or RDNA 6 comes out, we can give you that, right? So but that would be like a new iteration, say a mid-gen refresh type equivalent. But I would expect more iterations going forward on the Xbox side. It'll feel a lot more like PC, or like your phones that iterate every couple of years. You get new ones, right? It will just give you that option. You don't have to upgrade. You'll be fine where you are. You can if you want, right? And so it'll be a little bit different. Whereas PlayStation's kind of playing the old style game of here's a 7-year generation, right? So, Xbox will allow you to say, hey, if you want to, here you go. So enjoy if you want to do it, no problem, right? So by decoupling a bit, they do allow you to kind of do that. But they're virtually identical, mostly as far as the specs. I don't think the memory is going to be that different between the two of them. I would expect them to pretty much be at probably 24 would be my guess. Even 36 seems like a lot. I don't know why they'd go that high. I can see 48 for a dev kit, right? Because they're going to double the memory of your normal. But I would think 24 is enough. Kay, I'd like to get your thoughts on it when your turn comes, but I don't think they're going to go that crazy. Like they're at 16 now. Really, they're going to go to 48? That's insane. So I think that's where they're going to be. 32, is possible, but I think 24 is reasonable. So I don't think that's going to be a difference. I think the majority of the components are going to be very much similar. 2 terabytes ish would be my guess. So I don't see them being that different. As far as cost, I think the APU part of it is going to be cheaper for the PlayStation 6 because it's got lower CUs. It's also an APU that's a bit more monolithic, the old style, the way they used to do it. And this is more of a chiplet design. So I think it's going to be a bit more expensive, but it's not going to be like, $500 more expensive. We're talking maybe like $50, $100 more expensive in that range. So the biggest cost is going to be the APU. But then there's other components that you just have to pay for. They will have to pay for a hard drive, right? Like the NVMe is going to, there's a cost for that storage. There's a cost for memory, but they're both going to be pretty close in costs there. The cooling, the motherboard, all that. I mean, it's going to be, again, very close in costs. So I don't see them being that departure as far as cost. I could see $100, maybe even $200 at most, as far as the delta between them. So this is why I don't expect it to be like this astronomical difference. So if the PS6 comes in at $700, expect the Xbox to be $800 or $900 in that range. I would expect that kind of delta. I don't expect it to be $1,200 unless you're saying the PS6 is $1,100. But who's buying a PS6 for $1,100? That's kind of the world we're in, though, right? And like, even $700 to me is tough to take for a PS6 when the PS5 Pro is $750. So you have to kind of get that $750 down. If that happens, I can see $700. But if that doesn't happen, it's very hard to justify that your PS5 Pro is more expensive than the PS6. It's just a weird world we're in, but that kind of becomes your kind of floor. 750 is your floor unless they can reduce that down. They have a couple of years that might happen. So that's where I think it is. I don't think this is going to be $1,200 just seems ludicrous. I don't know where that's coming from. And I don't think they're going to compensate by subsidizing. I don't think that's going to happen. If there's a subsidy, it would be like very, very, very minimal in the beginning until they can cut the costs down a bit to make it so that it's profitable. But I it's not going to be like, PlayStation say, oh, we'll take a $300 hit just to, like, who are they competing against? They don't even think Microsoft is in like the console business anymore. They don't think of them as a competitor. And what they're terrified of the Switch 2? Like, why? Like, seriously? They're trying to drive their profits up. They're not trying to say, let's make less money. They're looking to make more money. I just don't see it. I don't see the value. They bumped all their console prices up so they can make money off of the consoles. That's where it is. Xbox did the same thing. They're looking for 30% profits. They're not going to give you, they're just not going to give you anything to go buy it. You have to buy it, pay for it. It's going to be fully funded by the consumer. I just don't see it being subsidized, and in both cases. So they'll be at cost, if not, profit right off the bat. So I'm guessing they'll be in the same range. Like, think about how much more power there was in the Series X versus the PS5. They still came out exactly the same cost, $500, same cost. It doesn't matter. Like, the cost differential might be a bit more because they don't want to take any hits. Fine, but I don't see it being like a $500 difference. That's insanity. So that's where I see this. As far as a lower cost option, I think an OEM could do something with that, but they would cut it back to something like the PS6 level performance, right? They could just say, hey, that part of it, we're just going to cut back on the number of CUs, right? That's why they have this scalability with the chiplet design. They can cut it back and say, we're going to make a smaller version of it and sell it to you for less. That's fair. But I don't know how much people want that versus, like, if I gave you an option, it was, $700 versus $800. $800 you get the full power, $700 you get, 80% of the power. Are you going to spend the 7 or are you going to spend the 8? I don't know, right? If it was like $400, now it's a big deal. Right now it's like, oh, okay, that makes sense, right? But now you're substantially undercutting, right? So now you're looking at Series S versus Series X. Okay, that might be a possibility, right? But I don't know if they're going to do that. We will see. I think Xbox is going to give you one SKU. It's going to be the Xbox. It's at the mid range of where they are on that, the Magnus APU, and they will then allow OEMs later. I don't know when, but later to say I can scale up and down, and you can go ahead and use that if you want to, right? So, and so we'll see how that plays out. Assuming that continues, I assume it will, but assuming they want to do the OEM thing. You will potentially have that. I'm looking forward to the one where they scale up. I can have even more power, but you can pay more. I'm that consumer. I'm happy to pay more to get more, right?
Yes,
so,
I agree.
but that doesn't mean the average need to do that, right? So it's got to come in at a reasonable price, and so I'm hoping they stay in that $700-800 range, which is still expensive. I get that, but it's where we are today, right? You can get an $800 Series X today. You can get a $750 PS5 Pro today. That is where we are today. That's just unfortunately the way it is, right? Yeah. So if they stay in that range, I think it's not as much of a sticker shock. It still sucks. I would love it to be $400 and $500. That's the reasonable price, but that's not where we are anymore. So you have to kind of expect that that's kind of where it's going to be. I don't want it to be in the 1,000+ range. I think that's ridiculous. So they need to kind of keep it below that, and hopefully they can. But yeah, there's a lot of rumors and a lot of fluff and a lot of I don't know what assumptions they're making that somehow it's going to be that much more expensive. I'm like, where do you get this? I don't understand. But this is kind of where we are. I don't think it's going to be that dramatically different. That's just my opinion, but we will see, right? I don't think it's $1,200 unless the PS6 is $1,100, which I don't think they're going to sell an $1,100 PS6. I just don't think that's going to happen. So I think you're still in that, it's going to be $700-800. Maybe this one is $900. I hope it stays at $800, something in that range. That's still reasonable because that's what the Series X 2 TB is today. That's what they're going to give you, 2 TB. But the current performance levels, I think that's where they're going to have to kind of keep it. And I think that's why they bumped it to $800, is to get you used to, hey, that's kind of where we're going to be. And I think $750 might be where PlayStation 6 is going to be. And they're like telling you, just be used to that. That's what we're going to sell it for. So that would be my guess. But I don't, The $1,200 just blows my mind. Like,
I don't know where they again. And people ran stories on that.
$1,200.
Honestly,
Holy crap!
Shocking.
I mean, if it comes out at $1,200, that's crazy. That's really crazy. But I don't think it's $1,200. I hope it's not $1,200. That would be a lot of money for a console. So I'm hoping it stays in that range. But yeah, and as far as the 4 times, that is absolute bunk. There's no way it's doing more than a 5090. Are you crazy? That's a $2,500 card.
Yep.
There's no way it's doing more than a 5090. That's insane. So no, I don't expect it to be that. I expect it to be similar to what we have with the Series X and the PS5. It's going to be a 20-ish% performance delta. That seems reasonable, and that's fine. Right? And again, for average day-to-day gaming, you're really not going to see it, but it's going to be there. If you do like the magnifying glass, yep, okay, this tree like lines will look better and all that. Yeah, it'll be there, right? But I think for day-to-day gaming, people will not notice. It'll be fine. Both of them are going to be fantastic boxes. But anyway, that's my rant.
No, I mean, well described rant. But I appreciate the hot take, and I actually hope that you are wrong on one thing. I hope that they do launch with 2 SKUs. I do. I really do hope that they're, instead of the traditional handheld, and it's not really even going to be traditional. I hope that when Xbox does do their handheld, I'd love to see them copy someone else's homework and actually make a Switch-like device that is a cheaper entryway into handheld gaming, right? But also give the gamer the ability to play on their screen by simply just docking it.
Yeah, but the thing is, once you start getting into portables, they're very expensive to make. They just so like the Switch 2, as I was telling everybody when they were like sticker shocked at $450, I'm like, that is a very good deal. That is a very good deal for what you're getting. It's a very good deal. But people didn't want to think that was a good deal, right? They wanted the $300
That's because
version.
they paid $300 for the last one. That's why.
Exactly, right? And I'm like, yeah. If you try to do this again, it's going to be expensive. Look, we have a $600, right? The $600 version of the ROG Ally, but it looks like people prefer the $1,000 version, right? But we can potentially see that they do that. So is it a viable path? Yes. But I don't know if people will want to gravitate towards that. We'll see. I don't think you're going to get that much of a leap in performance. That's going to be the problem, right? So even the ROG Ally, the normal, the lower tier one, does that really outdo the Series S? Does it do the Series X? No. So are you willing to pay more for that versus getting the new console generation? I don't know. I don't know what the market for that would be, right? So then you're looking at a major cost if you really want to go beyond that. So I don't know. And maybe Kay Santa, you can chime in on like the performance deltas between like the low tier versus the high tier, and if it makes a difference if you wanted to upgrade. And by the way, Series S and X aren't going away, or PS4, 5, they're not going away for a while.
Yep. No, they're not. Yep. No, I don't think they are. But listen, you know what? Actually, Kay, I do want to bring you in and we get your hot take on this, but I got to get to the super chats. There's been a couple of big bombs here, and it's from someone I've never seen in the chat before. So again, he just popped in here. So we had Pioneer drop a very generous $2 super chat. He says PlayStation isn't doing enough for me to take it serious or take it seriously. He's talking about the play. Well, I actually think he meant the PlayStation Portal. I mean, look. It's the biggest update that console or that handheld has gotten since its launch a couple of years ago, and I do think it's substantial. And I do like the way that Hargeet painted it. Again, for we're enthusiasts, right? And I know there's going to be some people thumbing their nose at this because you might have an MSI Claw, you might have one of the Lenovo handhelds, right? You might have a ROG Ally X, or heck, you might even have an Ally X right now. You might have an Xbox Ally X in your, right now you're using it. So we're enthusiasts, right? So for us, some people are going to thumb their nose at it. But for people who can't afford that, $200 and the subscription, which again, they got to be more forthcoming with that. Like you can't just buy this device and just expect it to work. It's a paperweight without having the subscription service. So at $200, I think is a good deal. If it's any cheaper, because I do like the Portal. I just don't use it as much as I should have, but it is a solid device. And especially if you're a fan of the DualSense, the controllers, it's a controller cut in half. That's just what it is. And the screen is really nice looking. It's just a nice looking screen. So I do think that this is a step forward. Is it a running sprint forward for Sony? No, it's not. They have a lot of work to do to get even into the same stratosphere as what Microsoft is doing and what Xbox is doing. I'm sorry, they are quite a few steps behind, but this is definitely a good step forward. We have here Marvelous Marvin. So not only, ladies and gentlemen, did he gift 10 double barrel gaming memberships. So Marvin, that is unbelievably generous of you. Thank you so much for hanging out, brother. And once again, thank you for the next $50 super chat, which is, I think, is way too much, dude. That is incredibly generous of you. Thank you so much for the support. He says, excellent live streams and videos, Mr. BoomStick XL and team. Xbox Series X and the future Xbox Magnus will forever rule. Well, I think they're off to a really good start. And I actually think we're going to get a sneak peek of Magnus next year. I like I said, I'm going to continue to bang this drum until I am proven wrong. I do think that at the Game Awards, and again, folks, this is me. I don't have any connections that would even, first of all, I would never even say this if someone told me this on the back end of things. This is just my personal opinion. I think that there's a real solid chance that Xbox could show off what their partnered OEM home console is going to look like at the Game Awards. Now, I don't have that on good authority. That's just me spitballing here. I mean, we did see in 2019 the Series X, and we did see Hellblade 2. And it came, and well, obviously the X came out in 2020. I mean, it literally is probably one of the most shocking moments in Game Awards history, besides Joseph Fares yelling at the microphone the Oscars, which again is just one of those moments you had to be there. But this could actually happen. I think that they are using these devices, meaning the Xbox Ally and the Xbox Ally X, to learn for when they go and they release their own handheld, which I believe there's going to be a handheld released alongside the console. Maybe it won't be a dockable handheld, but they're going to have a handheld. I'm like I said, I know what Hargeet said, and he's a smart man, and he's probably right. But in my heart of hearts, I think there is going to be a pair of devices. I know someone had said earlier, boom, you want another S situation. Listen, what they did with the S and X, they did for reasons. And it's listen, these next consoles are going to be PC hybrids. They're not going to have the same problems that the Series S and X had. They're just not. Even if it's a lesser powerful hybrid, it's still going to be a powerful enough hybrid to run your games. And I don't think because remember, it's going to be a PC hybrid, meaning that when they're making these games, they're making for PC, and you'll be able to play it with no problems. So thank you so much for the very generous 10 gifted subs, as well as the outstanding $50 super chat from Marvelous Marvin. So, brother, that is very kind of you and incredibly generous. Thank you so much for that. Kate Sante, let's bring you in. You're one of our other technical experts, especially when you talk about handhelds. But the next Xbox, this Kepler, L2, leak. He's a prominent AMD leaker. And obviously, Hargeet's breakdown on how it's not going to be 4 times as powerful was brilliant. It really was, and it made sense to me. Now I understand. But I want to get your thoughts on the leaked specs on this thing.
So I will tell you my thoughts that came to mind as I was watching all this stuff. For me, I've always been on the same page as to what all of this is moving towards. I could be wrong, but so far nothing I've said would happen has not happened. Right? Down to the name of the chip. It's called the Magnus. What is that saying? It sounds like it's the magnum opus, right? It is the last chip potentially, or the like how I see this facilitating, like how I see this going in the market is, if you know of a Surface device, you know what Surface does for Microsoft today. That's literally what we are talking about here, right? It's literally what we're talking about here, and it fits so well, right? And honestly, I think it will be a relatively decent device when you see it, right? Uh, uh, I've always contended that much like in the way where Microsoft had to come and show OEMs how to make a Windows machine, because HP was going crazy, Dell was going crazy, they're all just making really ridiculous things, and Microsoft had to come out and create something that was elegant and beautiful and well designed and say, see, this is Windows. Now go off, OEMs. This is Windows, right? And if anybody ever needs to know, here's our Surface line. And that's what you can point to. But what did they do? They made sure they stayed out of the OEM's way. They made their $1,700, $1,600 laptops cost $2,000 because they knew that Dell and HP had other variants that would fulfill that niche. They didn't want to step on the toes of their partners, right? So that device continues to live as like a Microsoft special, right? They make a lot of profit off of it because there's just no subsidization at all, right? They make up a very teeny tiny part of the market, but every time you buy one, they win because they made a profit, right? So even though it may not sell millions and millions and outdo all of their vendors, that's not what they want it to do. They just need it to be the reference design whenever anybody's messing around, right? Oh, Windows sucks. No, it doesn't. Look at the Surface. That's what the Surface is for, right? Similarly, while it looks like they've opened the floodgates on the console side to OEMs, they're building that one, right? Opus with its chiclet design has very high scalability, right? I wouldn't compare it to a PlayStation 6. Yeah, PlayStation 6 also PlayStation also they would all come from the same design house, but I think that the priorities that they're bringing to bear will change exactly what goes to where, right? So as we're talking about, the Microsoft has all these other plans, all these things they're wanting to do, their OEMs in play and all of this. That will drive them to make a scalable chip, because at the end of the day now, whenever they show you footage, they can show you a PC and say, yeah, this is part of our stack, right? They have completely upended what they consider their console platform. PlayStation, on the other hand, has done nothing of the sort, right? They are still in the you buy my games, you play my you buy you play my console, you play my games type situation, right? So although they too will benefit from a lot of these technologies, they're not upending the apple cart. They're not creating this hybrid open platform where you can get all this blah blah blah. Yeah, there are rumors of them trying to investigate in other platforms and bring them in and all that as well. But to your point, Boomstick, they are 100% going to make you a console. And let's be clear.
Yes.
In the world that consoles exist today and what we define as a console, what it should do, what it should cost. Yeah, either this thing is going to be expensive as a mug or it's not going to be very powerful, because the world we live in today is not making for too much brute forcing. It's not making for too many leaps in technology, because honestly, the rare earth minerals and all that stuff that is used to create some of these products is becoming more and more difficult for life reasons, economic and all of that reasons, right? So it's making what you have far more expensive. Honestly, I'm now looking at other devices from China that we're purchasing and all that. We used to buy hundreds of those things. Now it's very difficult to buy those things, because at the end of the day, not only are tariffs and things plaguing America, but just the cost of those devices have increased exponentially. I wanted to buy a laptop that had a Z Flow Extreme in it, the Z Flow Extreme, for those who don't know, an Asus device, really monster chip. It was $1,500 2 weeks ago. Could barely find it. It was sold out everywhere, but it was $1,500 to $1,700 entry point. Now it's back on the market. Same exact device, no change whatsoever. Starting price $2,000.
Holy crap!
This happened 2 weeks ago. I'm in the market to buy. I literally bought one. I only found an open box one because that was the only one that was literally on the market. But it was 2 open box. It was kind of grimy. It'd been used. I was like, nah, I'll wait till the new ones show up, right? And the new one shows up, and it's increase of $500 between one day and another. And that's just the world we live in, right? Everything has increased and it will stay that way. Unless something crazy happens to drop prices dramatically, we're finding ourselves in a new normal. And in that new normal, everything is crazy with price and position. So in that world, if PlayStation wants to build a console like you know it today, I would say don't expect too much of an uplift, because it's great to cost $500, but in that world, $500 doesn't move the needle between the PS4, 5, and 6. You know what I'm saying? Unless they're releasing this PS6 in like 2030, in which case they've allowed time for technology to catch up. So now $500 can give you something substantial. But if they're talking 2027, 2028, I don't foresee it being a huge bump if it stays at $5 which is where you want to be if you're a console, right? And I think that's probably why Microsoft is like, you know what? We're going all up and down the stack now. We don't care, right? If you want, our device will have that Magnus chip. It'll be the big dog pit bull. It'll do all the things. If you can't handle it, it'll probably cost you mad cheese. If you can't handle it, here's the Asus variant. Here's this variant. And those will come in
too.
7, 6. They'll come in at a more cromulent price point that normals will probably want to attach themselves to. And of course, it will also not come with all the crazy CUs and everything. It'll be considerably more cut down, right? More, but since those chips scale, it won't lose enough to where you feel like, oh man, it's not something I want, right? You and I will be like, oh hell yeah, give me that Microsoft special. Where's my $2,000? Let's buy that thing today. I'm being ridiculous. Yes.
No, but everybody on this panel
it
would
could
buy
be like
$2,000.
12, 13, like, somewhere like that. It could be somewhere like that, right? And all of us will go, yup, please, here you go. Because at that point, we expect a lot more for our dollar, right? No subsidy.
Be fine with the $2,000 one. Depends on what's in it.
That's right. Exactly.
Depends on what's in it.
Exactly. Right. But even though that may sound like gloom and doom for most, which I can agree sounds like gloom and doom, a $2,000 console, what the heck? Because it's not really a console, right? It's a console in only that they've cleaned up some of the PC-ness, right, of the build process. It is basically a PC hybrid. It's that dream you wanted when you were 15. Imagine if the console was like the most powerful thing. Yeah, that's what this is, right? That's what this will be. So for us, that'll be awesome. For those who don't care, you buy one that's a bit more cut down. You'll still play your games. You'll still have access to all your stuff. It's a good world. It may not be where we live today, and some people will be a little sad about it. I feel you, but long story short, it won't be bad, right? So I think his synopsis here has a very, very, very good foot in fact, right? Obviously, as we know with Microsoft and with most of these things, so much changes on the ground between the moment that they talk about it and to the moment the thing comes out. So it could come out and they could all be completely different. We could all be back to the same you buy my boxing thing. I mean, highly doubtful, highly doubtful. But hey, who knows, right? But so far, this is seemingly going in a very interesting direction. I'm excited to see where it turns out.
Real quick before we get us on out of here, because we're at the end of the show, folks. We're at the 90-minute mark. I do want to just kind of ask a question to Kay. You mentioned the Surface, right? Mm-hmm. So as we know, a Surface laptop is expensive, and they're really good.
Yes.
They're really high quality stuff, which is what this Xbox Magnus is probably going to be. It's going to be a high end console / PC hybrid. It's going to be expensive. It could be $800, like Hargeet said. He doesn't think it's going to be $1,000, and neither do I. I think it's going to be around the 800 mark, but we'll see. And I know that there's going to be some pushback where people say, "Well, what about the ROG? It's $1,000." There's a lot of difference there. You're talking about a handheld that's got to shrink everything down.
Different categories, yes.
Yeah, it's got a screen.
You don't have to worry about screens and batteries and power profiles. It's a different paradigm, different engineering challenges.
Yeah. So where I do want to kind of just turn and ask the question is, so for the people in the room who want the high-end experience, the premium curated experience, they'll be able to buy this $800 box. But this is where the OEMs come into play. And you said something that was very interesting. I want you to kind of clarify about what you would lose on a Alienware model versus the Microsoft designed and produced one.
Yeah. So, and this, funny enough, this is a very old lesson that you learned way back when, if you were watching like Dealer Gaming and the rest of them back in the day. He used to expound on that many, many
Yeah, he
times.
did.
And it bears repeating here. CPU complexity can't scale, GPUs can, right?
Mm.
And because of that, if you understand that fully, you understand how and why the series consoles were manufactured the way they were, right? If you look at it, the Series S is very close to the Series X in CPU like art, a CPU style. It's just a few clocks lower because they want to be able to make those complex worlds, and it stays the same. You can't scale complexity in that way. What you can scale is GPU definition and how grand things can get. You can dial it up or you can dial it back, right? But the complexity and the intelligence either is there or is not, right? So in that world, that's why they engineer everything as closely and as intelligently as they do, so that you can save some money, because you don't need all those CUs. You don't need to put the shadows to ultra. You don't need to be playing Cyberpunk on a handheld at like 80 frames per second, because maybe 60 will do, right? And in so doing, clawing it back to about 60 instead of 80, you're clawing back some CUs, which costs a lot of money, right? And how these chips are made, they don't make them to purpose exactly, right? They make them to and I'll use like a Strix Halo example, like one of the greatest chips that are out there on AMD side. They say, okay, we're making a Strix Halo chip, and they make 10 of them, and out of all 10, right, and the biggest top dog Strix Halo is called the 395 plus, right? Out of all 10, you'll get maybe 8 395 pluses, right? And then the 2 will be 385 pluses because they won't hit that 95 benchmark. And those 80s will cost you, the consumer, much less because they have less CUs. They don't work as well. But they're not considered quote unquote defaults or faults. They're just the lesser ones with lesser CUs, right? So that's where you get your where you get your Asus backed, maybe lesser tier. Yeah, it may not have as many crazy GPU horsepower to do so much, but where it matters, it'll be the same as you want, and it won't be 1200. Maybe it'll be 7.